Rain hammered the cracked pavement as Mira Callahan sprinted down the empty street, her son Eli limp and burning in her arms. His small body trembled with fever, his lips cracked and dry, his breathing shallow and fast. Every second felt like a knife twisting in her chest. She had already been turned away from 2 hospitals that night. No insurance, no money, no mercy. The last doctor had looked at her with cold eyes and said there was nothing more they could do without payment up front, as if her son's life had a price tag stamped on it like a piece of meat at a market stall. Mira's arms ached, but she barely noticed. Her mind was locked on one single thought: save Eli. Nothing else mattered. Not the rain soaking through her thin jacket, not the cold biting into her skin, not the exhaustion pulling at every muscle in her body. She had been walking and running for almost an hour, searching for anyone, anywhere, who might help. Then she saw it. A single light glowing behind a fogged window at the end of a narrow alley. A small sign above the door read "Private Clinic," hand-painted in fading letters. She had heard whispers about this place from a woman at the laundromat weeks ago. A place that helped people nobody else would touch. A place run by a man nobody seemed to know much about. Mira did not think twice. She ran toward the door, her shoes splashing through puddles, her heart pounding louder than the thunder above. She reached the door and pounded on it with her free hand, shouting into the storm. "Please, someone please open the door. My son is dying. Please help him." For a moment, nothing happened. The rain kept falling. Mira's voice cracked as she called out again, tears mixing with the rainwater on her face. She was ready to break the door down with her bare hands if she had to. Then, just as she raised her fist to pound again, the door swung open. A tall man stood in the doorway, silhouetted by dim light from inside. He wore a simple white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, and dark trousers that looked slightly out of place for a small clinic in a run-down part of the city. His hair was dark, slightly damp as if he had recently stepped out of the rain himself, though the ground behind him inside the clinic was completely dry. But it was his eyes that caught her attention first. Gray, almost silver in the low light, sharp and unreadable, studying her with an intensity that made her breath catch, despite the panic clawing at her chest. "Please," Mira said, her voice breaking. "Please, you have to help my son. He has a fever. He can barely breathe. I have nowhere else to go." The man's gaze shifted from her face to the boy in her arms. Something flickered across his expression, something Mira could not quite name. It was there and gone in an instant, replaced by a calm, steady focus that seemed almost too controlled for the chaos of the moment. "Bring him inside," the man said. His voice was low and even, carrying a strange weight to it, as though every word had been chosen with care. Mira did not hesitate. She stepped through the door, and the man closed it behind her, shutting out the storm. The clinic inside was small but clean, lit by a few warm lamps instead of harsh fluorescent lights. Shelves lined one wall, filled with bottles and jars she did not recognize, alongside standard medical equipment that seemed almost too advanced for such a modest space. A single examination table sat in the center of the room, covered with a fresh white sheet. "Lay him here," the man instructed, gesturing to the table. Mira gently placed Eli down, her hands trembling as she smoothed his damp hair away from his forehead. The boy stirred weakly, his eyes fluttering but not opening. He was only 7 years old, too young to understand what was happening to him, too weak to even cry out anymore. Mira had been his entire world since his father left before he was even born. She had raised him alone, worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over their heads, and now, in this one terrifying night, she felt more helpless than she ever had in her life. The man moved closer, his movements precise and unhurried, despite the urgency of the situation. He placed 2 fingers gently against Eli's wrist, checking his pulse, then leaned down to listen to his breathing. His brow furrowed slightly, and for a moment, Mira thought she saw something like recognition pass through his eyes, though she could not imagine what that could mean. He did not know them. He had never seen Eli before in his life. "How long has he had this fever?" the man asked without looking up. "Since yesterday morning," Mira answered quickly. "It kept getting worse. I tried everything I could think of. Cold cloths, medicine from the pharmacy, but nothing worked. Please, is he going to be okay?" The man did not answer right away. He continued his examination, his fingers moving with a gentleness that seemed at odds with the seriousness etched into his face. He pressed lightly against Eli's abdomen, checked the boy's eyes with a small light, and studied his skin for a long moment before finally straightening up. "I need to give him something," the man said. "It is not something you will find in a regular pharmacy. It works fast, but it is unconventional. I need your permission before I proceed." Mira's mind raced. She barely knew this man. She did not even know his name. Every instinct told her to be cautious, to ask questions, to demand answers, before allowing a stranger to give her son any kind of unknown treatment. But looking at Eli's pale face, his labored breathing, she knew she did not have the luxury of hesitation. "Do whatever you need to do," she said, her voice steady, despite the fear coursing through her. "Just save him, please." The man nodded once, as if her answer confirmed something he already expected. He moved to one of the shelves, and retrieved a small vial filled with a clear liquid that seemed to shimmer faintly under the lamplight, though Mira told herself it was simply a trick of exhaustion playing with her eyes. He drew a small amount into a syringe, his hands perfectly steady, and administered it carefully into Eli's arm. Mira watched, holding her breath, every second stretching into an eternity. She gripped the edge of the table so tightly her knuckles turned white. What if this made things worse? What if she had just made the biggest mistake of her life by trusting a stranger she found in a back alley clinic? Minutes passed in tense silence. The rain continued to beat against the windows outside. Mira's eyes never left her son's face, searching for any sign of change, any flicker of hope. Then, slowly, she noticed it. Eli's breathing began to even out. The harsh, rattling sound that had accompanied every inhale started to fade. Color began to return to his cheeks, replacing the ghostly pale that had frightened her so badly. "Is he?" Mira started, unable to finish the question. "The fever is breaking," the man said, checking Eli's forehead again. "His temperature is coming down. He will be weak for a while, but he is going to recover." Relief crashed over Mira like a wave, so overwhelming that her knees nearly buckled. Tears she had been holding back all night finally spilled freely down her cheeks. But this time they were tears of gratitude instead of desperation. She reached out and gently took Eli's small hand in hers, feeling the warmth returning to his skin, warmth that meant life instead of fever. "Thank you," she whispered, looking up at the man with an expression of pure gratitude. "Thank you so much. I do not know how to repay you for this. I do not even know your name." The man studied her for a moment before answering. "Cade," he said simply. "Just Cade," Mira repeated, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I am Mira. This is Eli. I promise you, I will find a way to repay you for what you have done tonight. I do not have much, but I will figure something out." Cade's expression remained unreadable, though something in his gray eyes seemed to soften slightly as he looked at the sleeping boy on the table. "That will not be necessary," he said, "but I would like to see him again in a few days, to make sure his recovery continues without complications. Bring him back to the clinic." Mira nodded quickly, grateful for any excuse to see this man again, to properly thank him once Eli was strong enough to understand what had happened. "Of course," she said. "Whatever you think is best. I trust you." Something flickered behind Cade's eyes at those words, something that looked almost like surprise, though it was gone before Mira could be certain she had seen it at all. He turned away, busying himself with cleaning the syringe and returning the vial to its place on the shelf, his movements a touch more hurried than before. As Mira gathered her strength to lift Eli again, now sleeping peacefully instead of feverish and weak, she glanced around the small clinic once more. It was strange, she thought, how quiet the street outside had seemed when she arrived, how this clinic had appeared almost out of nowhere, at the exact moment she needed it most. She noticed things she had missed before in her panic. The equipment on the shelves looked far more advanced than anything a small neighborhood clinic should have. There were no diplomas on the walls, no certificates, nothing to indicate where this man had trained or how he had come to possess such skill. "You are very good at what you do," Mira said, trying to make conversation as she prepared to leave, curiosity beginning to creep past her exhaustion and relief. "Have you been a doctor for a long time?" "Long enough," Cade answered, his tone giving nothing away. He helped her wrap a blanket around Eli's shoulders, his touch careful and precise, even in this simple gesture. "You should get him home and let him rest. He needs sleep more than anything right now." Mira nodded, sensing that further questions would not be welcomed, at least not tonight. She was too tired and too relieved to push for more information. There would be time for that later, she told herself. For now, all that mattered was that her son was safe, breathing easily, his fever finally broken. As she carried Eli toward the door, Cade opened it for her, the storm outside having weakened into a gentle drizzle. The worst of the night seemed to have passed, both outside and within the small clinic. Mira paused at the threshold, looking back at the man who had saved her son's life, without asking a single question about payment or insurance, without hesitation, despite the late hour and the desperation in her voice. "I mean it," Mira said softly. "I will never forget this. Whatever you need, whenever you need it, you can count on me." Cade's gaze lingered on her for a long moment, an expression crossing his face that Mira could not quite decipher. There was something guarded in his eyes, something that spoke of secrets kept carefully hidden, but there was also warmth there, a warmth that seemed almost startled by its own presence. "Get some rest, Mira," he said finally. "Both of you." She nodded and stepped out into the drizzling night, cradling her sleeping son against her chest. As she walked away from the clinic, she glanced back once more, but the door had already closed, the light behind the fogged window dimming, as though the strange doctor inside had retreated deeper into whatever shadows he called home. Mira did not know it yet, but that single knock on a stranger's door had changed everything. The man who called himself Cade was not simply a skilled doctor working in a forgotten corner of the city. He was something far more powerful, far more dangerous, and far more connected to her son's fate than she could have ever imagined on that rain-soaked night. Behind the closed door of the clinic, Cade stood motionless for a long time after Mira and Eli had disappeared into the darkness. His hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly as he gripped the edge of the examination table. He closed his eyes, replaying the moment he had first touched the boy's skin, the moment a scent had reached him that he had not encountered in years, a scent that stirred something deep and primal within him, something he had spent a long time trying to suppress. It could not be, he told himself. It was impossible. And yet, the boy's blood, the way his body had responded to the treatment, meant for those who were not entirely human, the subtle signs only someone like Cade would recognize. All of it pointed toward a truth he was not yet ready to accept. He moved to the window and watched the empty street, where Mira had vanished into the night, her son safe in her arms, unaware of the storm that was truly beginning, one that had nothing to do with rain or thunder. Somewhere out there, in a city full of millions of unaware souls, a woman named Mira Callahan had just unknowingly stepped into a world she never knew existed, a world of ancient bloodlines, hidden powers, and dangers that lurked far closer than she could have ever guessed. And at the center of it all stood Cade, a man who had hidden his true identity for years, now faced with the possibility that the family he thought he had lost forever might have just walked through his door, carried in the arms of a desperate mother who had no idea that the mysterious doctor she had begged to save her son was, in truth, the Alpha King himself. The rain finally stopped an hour later, leaving the city washed clean under a sky still heavy with clouds. But for both Mira and Cade, the storm that truly mattered was only just beginning, and neither of them yet understood how deeply their lives had already become entangled on this one unforgettable night. 3 days passed before Mira found the courage to return to the small clinic tucked away in the narrow alley. Eli had recovered remarkably fast, far faster than any doctor she had ever known could have predicted. By the second day, he was already asking for his favorite cereal and chasing their neighbor's cat around the small apartment courtyard, as though the fever that had nearly taken his life had never happened at all. Mira watched him with a mixture of relief and wonder, unable to shake the feeling that something extraordinary had happened that stormy night. She kept her promise to bring Eli back for a follow-up visit, partly out of gratitude, and partly because she could not stop thinking about the strange, quiet man who had saved her son without asking for anything in return. As she walked toward the clinic that afternoon, holding Eli's small hand while he skipped along beside her, chattering happily about a cartoon he had watched that morning, Mira found herself replaying details from that night. The way Cade's eyes had seemed to catch the light strangely, the unmarked bottles on his shelves, the complete absence of anything that would identify him as a licensed physician working in this part of the city. The clinic looked different in daylight, smaller somehow, and more ordinary, its faded sign barely visible against the weathered brick wall. Mira almost wondered if she had imagined the whole thing, if exhaustion and fear had conjured a fantastical rescue that had never truly happened. But when she pushed open the door and the small bell above it chimed, Cade appeared from a back room, and the memory of that night rushed back to her in full clarity. He looked different in the daylight too, less like a mysterious figure emerging from shadows, and more like an ordinary man, though his presence still carried that same quiet intensity she remembered. His gray eyes settled on Eli first, studying the boy with an expression Mira could not quite place, before shifting to meet her gaze. "You came back," Cade said, and Mira thought she detected the faintest hint of surprise in his voice, as though he had not been entirely certain she would keep her word. "Of course we did," Mira replied, guiding Eli forward gently. "I promised, remember? Besides, I wanted you to see how well he is doing. You would not believe how much energy this one has now." Eli, apparently unbothered by the strangeness of the situation, looked up at Cade with wide, curious eyes. "Are you the doctor who made me better?" he asked, his voice bright and completely without fear. Cade knelt down slightly, bringing himself to Eli's eye level, an action that struck Mira as unexpectedly gentle, for a man who seemed to carry so much reserved distance in his posture. "I helped," Cade said, "but you did most of the work yourself. You are a strong boy." Eli beamed at the praise, puffing out his small chest with pride. Mira smiled at the exchange, feeling a warmth in her chest that had little to do with the memory of that terrifying night, and more to do with watching this quiet stranger interact so carefully with her son. She had expected a brief examination, a few words, and a quick goodbye, but instead, Cade spent nearly 20 minutes checking Eli thoroughly, asking him questions about how he felt, testing his energy levels, listening to his heartbeat with an expression of focused concentration that seemed almost too serious for a routine checkup. "Everything appears normal," Cade finally said, straightening up. "His recovery has been excellent, better than I expected, honestly." "That is wonderful news," Mira said, relief washing over her again. "Thank you, truly. I still do not know how I can properly repay you for everything you have done. If there is anything at all, please let me know." Cade was quiet for a moment, his gaze drifting toward Eli, who had wandered over to examine a jar of colorful stones sitting on a nearby shelf, completely absorbed in childlike curiosity. There was something in Cade's expression during that pause, something distant and thoughtful, as though he were weighing words carefully before speaking them aloud. "I would like him to come back for a few more checkups," Cade said finally, "just to be certain there are no lingering effects from the treatment. It was not entirely conventional, and I want to be thorough." "Of course," Mira agreed without hesitation. "Whatever you think is best." As Eli continued exploring the small clinic, occasionally asking Cade questions about the strange instruments and jars scattered throughout the room, Mira found herself studying the mysterious doctor more closely. There was an economy to his movements, a controlled precision that seemed almost unnatural, as though every action had been carefully considered before execution. His voice, though calm and even, carried an undertone of authority that seemed out of place for someone running a small clinic in a forgotten corner of the city. "Can I ask you something?" Mira said, watching him carefully as he tidied a stack of papers on his desk. Cade glanced up, his expression giving away nothing. "You can ask." "Why here?" Mira continued. "This clinic, I mean. It is not exactly in the busiest part of town, and you clearly know what you are doing. You could probably work anywhere. Why choose this place?" For a long moment, Cade did not answer. His hands stilled on the papers, and something passed behind his eyes, something guarded and careful, like a door being quietly shut before anyone could see what lay beyond it. "I prefer working with people who truly need help," he said eventually. "People who have nowhere else to turn. There is more meaning in that than treating patients who could easily find care elsewhere." Mira nodded slowly, sensing there was far more to the story than he was willing to share, but she did not push further. She recognized the careful walls people built around themselves, having built more than a few of her own over the years since Eli's father had disappeared from their lives before their son was even born. If Cade had reasons for keeping his past private, she understood that better than most. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening again, the small bell chiming softly. A woman entered, tall and composed, with sharp features and dark hair pulled back into a neat braid. She wore clothing that seemed slightly out of place for the neighborhood, well tailored and clearly expensive, and she carried herself with an air of quiet authority that immediately shifted the atmosphere in the room. Her eyes swept over the scene, taking in Mira and Eli with a brief, assessing glance, before settling on Cade with obvious familiarity and something that looked like barely restrained urgency. "We need to talk," the woman said, her voice low but firm. "Now." Cade's posture changed instantly, his relaxed demeanor replaced by something more alert, more guarded. He glanced at Mira, an apology flickering briefly across his features. "If you will excuse me for just a moment," he said. Mira nodded, watching as Cade stepped away with the woman toward the back room, though he did not close the door completely. She caught fragments of their hushed conversation, words spoken low and urgent, though she could not make out most of what was being said. She heard the woman mention something about the territory, about scouts reporting unusual activity, about a meeting that could not be postponed any longer. Mira glanced at Eli, who remained happily absorbed in examining a small microscope on a side table, seemingly oblivious to the tension that had suddenly filled the room. She strained to listen without appearing obvious about it, curiosity mixing uneasily with a growing sense that this quiet doctor's life held far more complexity than his simple clinic suggested. She caught one phrase clearly before the voices dropped too low to understand. The woman's tone had shifted, becoming almost pleading. "Your people need you, Cade. You cannot keep hiding here forever." Mira's breath caught slightly. "Your people." It was an odd phrase, one that suggested Cade held some position of leadership or responsibility, far beyond running a small neighborhood clinic. She thought back to the rumors she had heard weeks ago, whispered fragments about a reclusive group called the Thornridge Pack, though at the time she had dismissed it as nothing more than local folklore, the kind of stories neighborhoods sometimes told about mysterious figures living on their fringes. When Cade returned a few minutes later, his expression had settled back into careful neutrality, though Mira noticed a tightness around his eyes that had not been there before. The woman remained near the back room, watching Mira with an expression that was difficult to read, somewhere between curiosity and caution. "I apologize for the interruption," Cade said, his voice steady once more. "This is my colleague, Nora. She assists me occasionally with certain matters." Nora offered a polite but reserved nod toward Mira, her sharp eyes lingering a moment too long on Eli before returning to Cade. "It was nice meeting you," Nora said, though her tone suggested the meeting had been anything but ordinary from her perspective. As Mira gathered Eli's things to prepare for their departure, she noticed Nora watching the boy with an intensity that made an uneasy chill crawl up her spine. It was the same kind of look she had caught in Cade's eyes that first night, a look of recognition mixed with something almost like disbelief, as though Eli reminded them both of something significant, something neither of them was prepared to voice aloud. "Thank you again for everything," Mira said as she took Eli's hand, preparing to leave. "We will come back whenever you would like to check on him." Cade walked them toward the door, his expression softening slightly as he looked down at Eli one final time. "Take care of yourself," he told the boy, "and try to stay out of trouble." Eli grinned up at him. "I will try, but trouble kind of likes me," he said, with the confident cheer only a 7-year-old could manage, making both Mira and Cade smile, despite the tension still lingering in the room. As Mira and Eli stepped outside into the afternoon sunlight, Mira glanced back once more before the door closed behind them. Through the window, she could see Cade and Nora resuming their hushed conversation, their postures tense, their expressions serious. Whatever was happening in that quiet clinic, whatever secrets Cade carried beneath his calm exterior, Mira was beginning to understand that she and Eli had stumbled into something far larger than a simple act of kindness from a skilled doctor. Walking home with Eli chattering happily beside her about the strange jars and instruments he had seen, Mira found herself unable to shake the unease settling in her chest. The whispered words she had overheard, the way Nora had studied Eli with such careful intensity, the mention of a pack and territory and people who needed their leader. None of it made sense to her rational mind, yet something deep inside her, some instinct she could not quite explain, told her that these fragments of overheard conversation were pieces of a much larger and stranger truth. That night, after tucking Eli into bed and listening to his breathing settle into the steady rhythm of peaceful sleep, Mira sat alone in her small kitchen, turning the day's events over in her mind. She thought about the birthmark on Eli's shoulder, shaped oddly like a paw print, which she had always dismissed as nothing more than an unusual pigmentation. She thought about her own mother, who had passed away years ago, and the strange stories she used to tell about their family having connections to something ancient and hidden. Stories Mira had always assumed were nothing more than fanciful bedtime tales. For the first time since that stormy night when she had pounded desperately on a stranger's door, Mira began to wonder if the world she thought she understood was far smaller than the truth actually waiting just beneath its surface, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. 2 weeks passed, and Mira found herself returning to the small clinic more often than she had originally planned. What began as follow-up visits for Eli slowly turned into something else entirely, though Mira could not quite name what that something was. She told herself it was simply gratitude, a natural desire to check in on the man who had saved her son's life, but if she was honest with herself in the quiet moments before sleep, she knew there was more to it than that. Cade remained a puzzle she could not solve. He was polite but reserved, warm toward Eli in ways that surprised her, yet guarded whenever conversation drifted too close to questions about his past or his life outside the clinic walls. Mira had learned to recognize the subtle shift in his posture whenever she asked something he was unwilling to answer, the way his jaw would tighten slightly, the way his gray eyes would grow distant, as though retreating behind an invisible wall. Yet despite his reluctance to share personal details, Cade seemed to genuinely enjoy Eli's company. The boy had taken to visiting the clinic with an enthusiasm that delighted Mira, chattering endlessly about his day at school, showing Cade drawings he had made, and asking a constant stream of questions about the strange equipment scattered throughout the small building. Cade answered each question with surprising patience, treating Eli's curiosity with a seriousness that most adults reserved only for matters they considered truly important. It was on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, while Eli sat at a small table sketching pictures with colored pencils Cade had given him, that Mira noticed something that sent an uneasy chill through her body. Cade had been standing near the boy, watching him draw, when his entire posture suddenly stiffened. His eyes narrowed slightly, fixed intently on Eli, and his nostrils flared in a way that reminded Mira uncomfortably of an animal catching an unexpected scent on the wind. "Cade," Mira said carefully, watching him with growing concern. "Is something wrong?" He did not answer immediately. Instead, he moved closer to Eli, kneeling down beside the table, studying the boy with an intensity that made Mira's protective instincts flare. "What is it?" she asked again, this time with more urgency in her voice. Cade seemed to catch himself, pulling back slightly, though the tension in his shoulders remained. "Nothing," he said, though his voice carried an unconvincing edge. "I apologize. I was simply distracted for a moment." Mira did not fully believe him, but she chose not to push the issue in front of Eli, who remained blissfully unaware of the strange moment that had just passed, still focused entirely on shading in the wings of a dragon he was drawing. Later, as Eli played quietly with a puzzle in the corner of the clinic, Mira approached Cade again, her curiosity finally overriding her hesitation. "You have been acting strange around him lately," Mira said quietly, keeping her voice low enough that Eli would not overhear. "Ever since that day with Nora, actually. Is there something you are not telling me about my son?" Cade's expression flickered, something complicated passing behind his eyes, before he schooled his features back into careful neutrality. "There are things about his condition that I am still trying to understand fully," he said carefully. "I do not want to alarm you unnecessarily, before I have all the answers myself." "His condition," Mira repeated, alarm creeping into her voice despite his attempt at reassurance. "Cade, if something is wrong with him, I need to know. He is my son. I have to know everything, even if it is frightening." Cade was quiet for a long moment, his gaze drifting toward Eli, who remained absorbed in his puzzle, humming softly to himself, completely unaware of the weight of the conversation happening just a few feet away. When Cade finally spoke again, his voice had taken on a careful, measured quality, as though he were choosing each word with extreme precision. "There are certain markers in his blood," Cade said slowly, "markers that are unusual, rare. I have only encountered them a handful of times in my career, and never quite like this." "What kind of markers?" Mira pressed, her heart beginning to race. "Is it dangerous? Is he sick with something else?" "No," Cade said quickly, and Mira felt a small measure of relief at the immediate reassurance. "He is not sick. If anything, these markers suggest he is remarkably healthy, stronger than most children his age, in ways that are difficult to explain through ordinary medical understanding. Then what does it mean? Mira asked, confusion mixing with her lingering worry. I do not understand. Cade hesitated again, and Mira could see the internal struggle playing out across his features, the careful weighing of how much truth he was willing to share against whatever instinct told him to remain silent. Finally, he seemed to reach a decision, though it was clearly not one he made lightly. I need to run a few more tests, he said. I promise I will explain everything once I have concrete answers. I do not want to speculate and cause you unnecessary worry. Mira studied him carefully, searching his expression for any sign of deception, but found only genuine caution, the look of a man carefully navigating a situation he himself did not fully understand yet. She nodded slowly, though the unease in her chest did not fully dissolve. Okay, she said. But please, Cade, whatever it is, do not keep me in the dark for too long. He is all I have. If there is something wrong with him, I need to be prepared to help him however I can. I understand, Cade said, and something in his tone made Mira believe him completely. I would never keep something from you that could put him at risk. You have my word. That evening, after leaving the clinic and walking Eli home through the golden light of early evening, Mira found herself replaying every strange interaction, every guarded expression, every whispered fragment of conversation she had overheard since that first stormy night. Something significant was happening, something connected to her son in ways she could not yet comprehend, and the not knowing gnawed at her more painfully than any clear danger could have. Later that night, after Eli had fallen asleep, Mira sat by her window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, and allowed herself to finally think about the strange stories her mother used to tell when Mira was a young girl. Stories about hidden bloodlines, about families connected to something ancient and powerful that lived quietly among ordinary people, disguised so well that most never suspected the truth existing right beside them. Mira had always assumed these were simply fantastical tales meant to entertain a restless child before bedtime, the kind of imaginative stories parents often invented to spark wonder in their children. Her mother had passed away when Mira was only 19, taking whatever deeper meaning those stories might have held with her, leaving Mira with nothing but fragmented, half-remembered fairy tales that seemed increasingly relevant with each passing day. She thought about her own father, a man she had never known, who had left before Mira was even born, leaving her mother to raise her alone, in circumstances not entirely different from Mira's own life with Eli now. Her mother had always been vague about him, offering only cryptic hints that he came from a world very different from their own, a world Mira's mother had chosen to leave behind, for reasons she never fully explained. Could it be possible, Mira wondered, staring out at the darkened city, that these fragments of family history connected somehow to whatever strange markers Cade had discovered in Eli's blood? The thought seemed absurd on its surface, the kind of connection only found in fantastical stories rather than real life, yet something about it resonated with an instinct Mira could not quite silence. The following week, Mira returned to the clinic alone, while Eli stayed with a trusted neighbor, determined to get clearer answers from Cade about whatever tests he had been running. She found him in the back room, surrounded by papers and small vials, his expression tired but focused, dark circles beneath his eyes, suggesting he had not slept properly in days. You look exhausted, Mira observed, concern momentarily overshadowing her determination to demand answers. I have been busy, Cade said simply, gesturing for her to sit in the chair across from his desk. I am glad you came alone today. There are things I need to discuss with you, things that will be easier to explain without Eli present. Mira's stomach tightened with apprehension as she took the offered seat. Tell me, she said. Whatever it is, I am ready to hear it. Cade leaned back in his chair, studying her for a long moment before finally speaking. What I am about to tell you will sound impossible, he began. I need you to trust me and listen with an open mind, even if everything within you wants to dismiss what I am saying as nonsense. Mira nodded slowly, her heart pounding steadily in her chest, sensing that whatever truth Cade was about to reveal would change everything she thought she understood about her life, her son, and the strange, careful man who had saved him that stormy night weeks ago. I am not simply a doctor, Cade said finally, his gray eyes meeting hers with unwavering intensity. There are things about me, about my true identity, that I have kept hidden for very good reasons, but your son's condition, The markers I found in his blood. They are connected to who I truly am, in ways I did not expect, and could not have anticipated, when I first opened that door, and let you both inside. Mira sat perfectly still, every instinct telling her that the next words Cade spoke would confirm suspicions she had been too afraid to fully acknowledge, even to herself, ever since that first strange night, when a mysterious stranger with unsettling gray eyes had reached into an unknown vial and saved her son's life, with a treatment no ordinary hospital would have dared to risk. Cade rose from his chair and moved toward the window, his back to Mira for a moment, as though gathering the courage to continue. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the narrow street, and the ordinary sounds of the city continued, unaware of the extraordinary conversation unfolding within the small clinic walls. What I am going to tell you exists outside the boundaries of what most people believe to be possible, Cade said, turning back to face her. There are people in this world, families really, bloodlines, who carry abilities passed down through generations. Strength beyond normal human limits. Senses sharper than anything science can easily explain. A connection to instinct and nature that most humans have long since lost. Mira listened carefully, her mind racing to process what he was describing. Memories of her mother's old stories resurfacing with startling clarity. Are you saying, she began slowly, that you are one of these people? Cade nodded once. I lead one such family, he said. A group others sometimes refer to as a pack. We have lived quietly for generations, hidden among ordinary society, careful never to reveal ourselves openly, for fear of the danger and chaos such knowledge would create if discovered by the wrong people. Despite every rational part of her mind urging skepticism, Mira found herself believing him without hesitation, the pieces of the past weeks finally clicking into place with unsettling clarity. The strange scent Cade seemed to catch around Eli. The whispered conversation with Nora about territory and people needing their leader. The unusual markers in her son's blood that no ordinary medical test should have detected. And Eli, Mira said quietly, her voice trembling slightly despite her effort to remain composed. You believe he carries this same ability, this bloodline? I believe it is possible, Cade said carefully. More than possible, honestly. The markers in his blood are consistent with families connected to my world, though the specific origin remains something I am still trying to trace. It would explain why the treatment worked as effectively and quickly as it did, why his body responded in ways an ordinary child's body simply could not have managed. Mira sat in stunned silence, trying to reconcile this impossible information with everything she thought she knew about her son, about herself, about the ordinary life she had believed they shared together. Her mind drifted back to her mother's stories once more, no longer dismissed as simple fairy tales but reconsidered now as fragments of truth, carefully disguised in the comforting shape of bedtime fiction. My mother used to tell me stories, Mira said slowly, almost to herself, about families connected to something ancient. I always thought they were just stories, something she made up to entertain me as a child. But now, hearing you say all of this, I wonder if she was trying to tell me something real, something about where we came from. Cade's expression softened slightly, a rare flicker of genuine warmth breaking through his usually careful composure. It is possible your family carries this bloodline further back than you realize, he said. If you are willing, I would like to run some tests on you as well, simply to better understand the full picture. It would help me determine the best way to protect Eli moving forward. Protect him, Mira repeated, alarm sharpening in her voice. Protect him from what? Is he in danger? Cade's jaw tightened, and Mira recognized immediately that she had struck upon something he had been hesitant to reveal. There are others in my world, he said carefully, who do not share the same values my family holds regarding peace and discretion. Bloodlines like the one Eli might carry are valuable to certain factions. Some would see a child with untapped potential as an opportunity to exploit, or worse, eliminate, before that potential could ever be realized as a threat to their own ambitions. Mira's blood ran cold at his words, every protective instinct within her flaring to sharp, immediate alertness. No one is touching my son, she said fiercely, her voice steady, despite the fear coursing through her. I do not care what world you come from, or what politics exist within it. I will protect him with everything I have. I know, Cade said quietly. something like admiration flickering in his gray eyes as he studied her fierce determination. "That is precisely why I need you to trust me completely moving forward. I can help protect him, but only if you allow me to guide you both through what comes next, even when it seems strange or frightening." Mira took a steadying breath, forcing herself to think clearly despite the chaos of emotions swirling within her. "What do we need to do?" she asked finally, her voice regaining its composure. "Tell me exactly what steps we need to take to keep him safe." Cade returned to his seat across from her, his expression settling into the focused, determined look Mira recognized from that first stormy night when he had worked tirelessly to save Eli's life. "First," he said, "I need to complete a more thorough assessment for both you and Eli. Understanding the full extent of his abilities and connections will help me determine what precautions are necessary." "And after that?" Mira asked. "After that," Cade said, "we discuss what comes next, together. I will not make decisions about your son's safety without your full understanding and agreement. This is your family, your choice. I am simply here to offer guidance and protection, should you choose to accept it." Mira studied him carefully, searching for any hint of deception or hidden agenda, but found only sincerity in his steady gray gaze, the same quiet determination she had witnessed the night he saved Eli, without hesitation or expectation of reward. Despite the impossible nature of everything he had just revealed, despite the fear now settling heavily in her chest at the thought of danger lurking somewhere in the shadows of this hidden world, Mira found herself trusting him completely. "Okay," she said finally. "Whatever tests you need to run, whatever precautions we need to take, I am ready. Just promise me one thing." "Anything," Cade said. "Promise me you will always tell me the truth," Mira said, her voice firm, despite the vulnerability beneath it. "No matter how difficult or frightening it might be, I need to know I can trust you completely if we are going to get through whatever comes next." Cade held her gaze steadily, something resolute settling into his expression. "I promise," he said. "You have my word, as Alpha, and as a man who owes your son his gratitude for reminding him what it feels like to truly care about protecting someone again." The word Alpha hung in the air between them, carrying weight Mira did not yet fully understand, though she sensed instinctively that it represented far more than a simple title. As the afternoon light shifted toward evening outside the clinic windows, Mira realized that her entire understanding of reality had shifted as dramatically as the changing light, revealing a world hidden just beneath the surface of everything she had once believed to be ordinary and safe. Whatever dangers lay ahead, whatever secrets remained to be uncovered about her son's true heritage and the strange, powerful man who had saved his life, Mira knew there was no turning back now. She had stepped through a door that stormy night seeking nothing more than help for her sick child, and in doing so, had unknowingly opened a path toward a destiny far larger and more extraordinary than anything she could have ever imagined for herself or for Eli. The following days passed in a strange blur for Mira, ordinary routines colliding uneasily against the extraordinary truth she now carried within her. She still woke early to prepare Eli's breakfast, still walked him to school past the familiar corner store, where the elderly owner always waved cheerfully, still worked her shifts at the small diner downtown, where regular customers greeted her with tired but friendly smiles. Yet beneath the surface of this familiar routine, everything had changed. She found herself watching Eli more closely now, noticing small details she had never paid attention to before. The way he seemed to hear sounds from farther away than other children, tilting his head toward noises she could barely detect herself. The way he ran faster than his classmates during recess, something his teacher had once mentioned in passing as simply being naturally athletic. The birthmark on his shoulder, shaped like a small paw print, that Mira had always dismissed as nothing more than an unusual pigmentation pattern. Now, knowing what she knew, every one of these small details took on new significance, pieces of a puzzle Mira was only beginning to understand. On Saturday, while Eli attended a friend's birthday party, Mira returned to the clinic alone for the tests Cade had requested. She sat quietly as he drew a small sample of her blood, his hands as steady and careful as they had been that first night he treated Eli, though there was a new tension in his posture that suggested this particular test carried significance beyond simple medical curiosity. "This will take some time to analyze properly," Cade explained, labeling the small vial with practiced efficiency. "In the meantime, I would like to ask you some questions about your family history, if you are willing to share what you remember." Mira nodded, settling into the chair across from his desk. I do not know much, she admitted. My mother rarely spoke about our family before she had me. I know almost nothing about my father, except that he left before I was born. Do you remember anything your mother told you? Cade asked gently. Even small details might help me understand the full picture. Mira thought carefully, memories she had not revisited in years slowly surfacing from the depths of her mind. She used to tell me stories, Mira said slowly, about wolves living among people, hidden in plain sight. I always thought they were just fairy tales, the kind of stories parents invent to entertain children before bedtime, but she told them with such seriousness sometimes, almost like warnings rather than entertainment. What kind of warnings? Cade asked, leaning forward slightly, his attention fully focused on her words. She used to tell me to never trust easily, Mira continued, the memories becoming clearer now that she allowed herself to fully examine them. To always pay attention to my instincts, especially around certain kinds of people. She said our family carried something special, something that needed to be protected and kept secret. I always assumed she meant something metaphorical, like our resilience, or our determination to survive, despite difficult circumstances. Cade was quiet for a long moment, processing her words carefully. It sounds like your mother may have known more about her heritage than she ever directly revealed to you, he said finally. Perhaps she chose to keep you separated from that world intentionally, believing it would be safer for you to grow up without the complications and dangers such knowledge might bring. Mira felt a pang of sadness at this realization, wishing desperately that her mother had lived long enough to answer the questions Mira now found herself asking, questions that might have made sense of so much confusion during her own childhood. Do you think, she asked hesitantly, that my father might have been connected to your world somehow? Is that why he left? It is possible, Cade said carefully. Sometimes individuals connected to hidden bloodlines choose to distance themselves from that world for various reasons, sometimes for protection, sometimes due to conflict within their own families or communities. Without more information, I cannot say for certain what circumstances led to his departure. Mira absorbed this information silently, feeling the weight of questions that might never find complete answers. Yet despite the uncertainty, something within her had begun to shift, a growing sense of understanding, replacing the confusion and fear that had dominated her thoughts since Cade's revelation days earlier. Over the following week, as Cade continued analyzing the test results, Mira found herself spending increasing amounts of time at the clinic, both for the ongoing assessments and, she admitted quietly to herself, for the growing comfort she found in Cade's steady, careful presence. Their conversations gradually expanded beyond clinical discussions of bloodlines and blood markers, touching on lighter subjects as well, shared observations about the city, favorite books, small moments of genuine connection that surprised them both with their ease. Eli, too, had grown increasingly comfortable during their visits, treating the clinic almost like a second home, greeting Cade with enthusiastic hugs that seemed to catch the reserved doctor off guard each time, though Mira noticed he never pulled away from the boy's affection, instead standing a little straighter, a little warmer, each time Eli wrapped his small arms around him in greeting. One afternoon, as Eli napped on a small cot in the corner of the clinic after an active morning of play, Mira sat with Cade, reviewing the latest test results spread across his desk. The confirmation is definitive, Cade said quietly, sliding a paper toward her. Your bloodline carries clear markers connecting to an old pack lineage, one that seems to have gone dormant or hidden for at least 2 generations before you. Eli's connection is even stronger, likely due to combined heritage from both you and his father. Mira studied the paper, though the technical details meant little to her without Cade's explanation. What does this mean for us, practically speaking? She asked. What comes next? Cade leaned back in his chair, considering his words carefully before responding. It means Eli possesses genuine potential within our world, he said. As he grows older, his abilities will likely continue developing, potentially quite significantly, given the strength of markers present in his blood. It also means, unfortunately, that others within our world may eventually take notice, particularly if word spreads about a child carrying such a strong dormant bloodline suddenly resurfacing. The same danger you mentioned before, Mira said, her earlier fear returning with renewed intensity. Someone might try to hurt him. Cade's expression grew serious, his gray eyes meeting hers with unwavering steadiness. "I will not allow that to happen," he said firmly. "I have already begun taking precautions, ensuring that information about Eli's condition remains carefully controlled. But I want to be honest with you, Mira, as I promised. The world I come from carries genuine dangers, politics and rivalries that have existed for generations, and I cannot guarantee complete safety without your full cooperation and trust moving forward." Mira nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of his words. "What do you need from me?" she asked. "Tell me exactly what steps we should take." "For now," Cade said, "continue your normal routines as much as possible. Avoid discussing what you have learned with anyone outside this clinic, no matter how much you might trust them. I will continue monitoring the situation carefully, and if I sense any immediate threat, I will inform you immediately, so we can take appropriate action." "And if something happens before you sense it?" Mira asked, unable to fully silence the anxious thoughts running through her mind. "What then?" Cade reached across the desk, his hand hovering near hers for a moment, before gently resting atop it, a gesture of reassurance that surprised them both with its warmth. "That will not happen," he said quietly, his voice carrying quiet confidence. "I promise you, Mira, I will protect both of you, with everything within my power. You have my word, as Alpha, and more importantly, you have my word, as someone who has come to care deeply about your well-being and Eli's safety." Something in his tone, in the sincerity radiating from his steady gray eyes, eased the tightness in Mira's chest, replacing fear with a fragile but growing sense of trust. She studied his face for a long moment, noticing details she had somehow missed before despite their weeks of growing acquaintance. The faint lines of exhaustion around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights spent protecting others. The careful way he held himself, always alert, always watchful, as though danger might emerge from any direction at any moment. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. I do not know how Eli and I would have survived any of this without you." Cade's hand remained gently atop hers a moment longer before he withdrew it, though something had shifted subtly between them, an unspoken acknowledgement of the connection quietly growing beneath the surface of their careful, professional interactions. "You do not need to thank me," he said, his voice quieter now, more vulnerable than Mira had ever heard it. "Protecting you and Eli has become far more important to me than I initially expected it would." The moment lingered between them, comfortable despite the underlying tension of unspoken feelings neither was quite ready to fully acknowledge. From the corner cot, Eli stirred slightly in his sleep, murmuring something unintelligible, before settling back into peaceful rest, blissfully unaware of the extraordinary conversation happening quietly nearby, a conversation that would ultimately shape the course of both his and his mother's futures in ways none of them could yet fully comprehend. As the afternoon sun began its slow descent toward evening, casting warm golden light across the small clinic, Mira allowed herself, for the first time since that stormy night weeks ago, to feel a genuine sense of hope amid the uncertainty and danger now surrounding her family. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever hidden world of ancient bloodlines and dangerous rivalries awaited them, she no longer felt as though she and Eli were facing it entirely alone. Late one evening, nearly a month after that first desperate night at the clinic, Mira sat at her small kitchen table, sorting through a worn cardboard box she had not opened in years. Inside were a handful of photographs, a few pieces of jewelry that had belonged to her mother, and a small leather-bound journal with a cracked spine that Mira had always been too emotional to read since her mother's passing. Tonight, driven by everything Cade had revealed, she finally opened the journal, her hands trembling slightly as she turned the fragile pages filled with her mother's familiar handwriting. Most entries were mundane, small observations about daily life, brief notes about Mira's childhood milestones. But scattered throughout were passages that took on entirely new meaning, given what Mira now understood about her heritage. One entry, dated years before Mira's birth, caught her attention immediately. Her mother had written about meeting a man at a gathering she described only as belonging to the old families. A man whose eyes held secrets he was unwilling to share, whose presence carried a quiet strength unlike anyone she had ever known. Mira's breath caught as she read further, recognizing unmistakable similarities between her mother's careful, coded descriptions and Mira's own recent experiences with Cade. Later entries grew increasingly cryptic, mentioning difficult decisions, warnings about danger following those connected to certain bloodlines, and finally, a heartbreaking passage written shortly before Mira's birth, describing her mother's decision to leave that world behind entirely, to protect the child she was carrying from dangers she feared would follow them otherwise. "I choose ordinary life for my daughter," her mother had written, "even if it means she never knows the truth of where she comes from. Some inheritances bring more danger than blessing, and I will not risk her safety for the sake of preserving traditions that have already cost our family so much." Tears blurred Mira's vision as she finished reading, finally understanding the weight of sacrifice her mother had carried silently for years, choosing to shield her daughter from a truth that might have offered answers, but also invited danger into their quiet, ordinary lives. Mira closed the journal gently, holding it against her chest, as she allowed herself a few moments to grieve anew for the mother who had protected her in ways Mira was only now beginning to fully comprehend. The following morning, she brought the journal to the clinic, sharing its contents with Cade, who listened with quiet intensity as she read aloud the passages that had illuminated so much about her family's hidden past. When she finished, Cade remained silent for a long moment, processing the new information carefully. "Your mother sounds like she was an incredibly brave woman," he said finally, "choosing to walk away from everything familiar to protect you, knowing she would carry that secret alone for the rest of her life. That takes remarkable courage." "I wish she had told me," Mira said softly, "though I understand why she chose not to. She was trying to keep me safe." "And you are doing the same for Eli now," Cade observed gently. "Making difficult choices to ensure his safety and well-being, even when those choices require sacrifice and uncertainty." Mira nodded, finding unexpected comfort in the parallel between her mother's choices and her own current situation. "I just wish I understood more clearly what dangers we are actually facing," she admitted. "You have mentioned rivalries and factions within your world, but I still do not fully understand who or what we need to be prepared for." Cade's expression grew more serious, and Mira sensed he was about to share information he had been carefully withholding until now. "There is a rival family," he said finally, "one that has long sought greater influence and territory than my own family currently holds. Years ago, before I took my current position, there was significant conflict between our families, conflict that resulted in considerable loss on both sides." "What kind of loss?" Mira asked carefully. "My predecessor, and several close family members, were targeted in a series of calculated attacks," Cade said, his voice carrying old grief, carefully controlled beneath practiced composure. "It was during this period that I withdrew from open pack life, choosing instead to establish this clinic, working quietly among humans while maintaining careful surveillance over ongoing tensions within my world." Mira listened with growing understanding, pieces of Cade's guarded nature, finally beginning to make complete sense. "That explains why you have kept such a low profile," she said, "why the clinic seems so removed from whatever larger world you actually belong to." "Exactly," Cade confirmed. "I have spent years working to protect my remaining family members and loyal followers from further danger, believing that maintaining distance and secrecy was our safest path forward. But recent developments suggest the rival family's ambitions have not diminished with time. If they discover a child carrying strong dormant bloodline markers has resurfaced, particularly one connected to my own protection and care, they may see it as both a threat and an opportunity worth pursuing aggressively." Mira's chest tightened with renewed fear at this explanation, understanding now the true weight of danger potentially surrounding her son. "What can we do to protect him?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear coursing beneath her calm exterior. "I have already begun strengthening security measures around the clinic and your neighborhood," Cade said. "Trusted members of my pack are monitoring the situation discreetly, watching for any signs of unusual activity or unfamiliar presence that might suggest the rival family has become aware of Eli's existence." "Should we consider moving?" Mira asked, the thought only just occurring to her, though the idea of uprooting Eli's entire familiar world filled her with reluctance. "That may become necessary eventually," Cade acknowledged carefully. "But for now, sudden changes might draw more attention than they prevent. I believe our best course of action is maintaining careful vigilance while continuing to strengthen protective measures around you both." Mira nodded, trusting his judgment despite the underlying anxiety that had settled permanently in her chest since learning the full scope of danger potentially facing her family. As their conversation continued, discussing practical steps for maintaining safety while preserving as much normalcy as possible for Eli's sake, Mira found herself grateful once again for Cade's steady presence, his careful competence providing a foundation of stability amid circumstances that felt increasingly overwhelming. That afternoon, as she watched Eli play happily in the small courtyard behind the clinic, chasing a ball with the same carefree joy any ordinary 7-year-old might display, Mira allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. Her son remained blissfully unaware of the hidden dangers now surrounding their lives, unaware of the ancient bloodline coursing through his veins, unaware of the powerful, protective man watching over them both with quiet, unwavering dedication. Whatever challenges awaited them in the days ahead, whatever dangers lurked within the shadows of a hidden world, Mira was only beginning to understand. She found herself drawing strength from her mother's sacrifice, from Cade's steady protection, and from the fierce, unshakable love she carried for her son. Together, she believed, they would find a way through whatever storm still remained ahead, just as they had weathered the storm that first brought them to Cade's door weeks ago. The attack came on an ordinary Thursday night, exactly when Mira least expected it. Eli had already fallen asleep, worn out from a long day at school, followed by an evening of energetic play with friends in the courtyard. Mira sat curled on the worn sofa in their small living room, half watching a television program while folding a basket of laundry, her mind still processing everything she had learned over the past weeks about the hidden world now woven into their lives. She first noticed something wrong when the hallway light outside her apartment flickered strangely, casting brief shadows beneath her door that seemed too deliberate, too controlled, to be caused by anything ordinary. Setting aside the laundry, she moved quietly toward the door, pressing her eye against the small peephole, though the hallway beyond appeared empty and undisturbed. She told herself she was simply being paranoid, her nerves stretched thin from weeks of tension and uncertainty. Yet something instinctive, some deep awareness she was only beginning to recognize as connected to her own dormant heritage, refused to settle. She checked that the door was securely locked, then moved to check on Eli, finding him peacefully asleep in his small bed, his stuffed rabbit tucked securely beneath one arm. Returning to the living room, Mira had barely settled back onto the sofa when a sharp, sudden crash echoed from the direction of the kitchen window. Her heart lurched violently as she spun toward the sound, catching sight of the window swinging open, glass scattered across the floor, and a dark figure climbing swiftly through the broken frame. Every instinct within her screamed danger, and without conscious thought, Mira found herself moving with speed and precision that startled her, positioning herself between the intruder and the hallway leading toward Eli's room. The figure straightened, revealing a tall man dressed entirely in dark clothing, his eyes catching the dim light with an unnatural gleam that confirmed immediately he was no ordinary burglar. "Where is the boy?" the man demanded, his voice low and threatening, carrying an authority that made the hair on Mira's arms stand on end. "You are not touching my son," Mira said fiercely, planting herself firmly in the narrow hallway despite the fear pounding through her chest. Every protective instinct she possessed had risen to the surface, overriding rational thoughts of self-preservation entirely. The intruder took a step closer, studying her with cold calculation. "You do not understand what you are protecting him from," he said. "It would be easier for everyone if you simply stepped aside." "Never," Mira snarled, surprising herself with the ferocity of her own voice, a sound that seemed to carry more weight and power than she had ever produced before. The man lunged forward suddenly, moving with a speed that should have been impossible for any ordinary human. Mira barely had time to react, throwing herself sideways to avoid his outstretched hand, adrenaline surging through her veins as survival instinct took complete control. She grabbed a heavy lamp from a nearby table, swinging it desperately toward the attacker, though he easily deflected the blow with practiced ease. Before he could press his advantage further, the apartment door burst open with tremendous force, the wood splintering from its hinges as Cade appeared in the doorway, his expression transformed into something fierce and dangerous that Mira had never witnessed before. His gray eyes had shifted, taking on an intense golden hue that seemed almost to glow in the dim apartment light, and his entire presence radiated barely restrained power. "Get away from her," Cade commanded, his voice carrying an authority so absolute that even the intruder froze momentarily in response. The attacker's confidence wavered visibly as he assessed this new threat, though he quickly recovered his composure, adopting a fighting stance. "You should not be here, Alpha," the man said, though his voice now carried noticeably less certainty than before. "This does not concern your pack directly. Anyone who threatens those under my protection concerns me directly," Cade replied, his voice deadly calm despite the tension radiating from his tightly controlled posture. What followed happened almost too quickly for Mira to fully process. Cade moved with impossible speed, closing the distance between himself and the intruder in a fraction of a second. The resulting confrontation was swift and decisive, Cade's superior strength and skill quickly overwhelming the attacker's attempts at resistance. Within moments, the intruder lay subdued on the living room floor, held firmly in place by Cade's controlled but unyielding grip. Mira stood frozen, her heart still racing, watching the scene unfold with a mixture of fear and awe. She had witnessed glimpses of Cade's true nature before, subtle hints of the power he carefully kept hidden beneath his composed exterior, but nothing had prepared her for the full display of strength and authority he now demonstrated. "Are you hurt?" Cade asked, his gaze shifting toward Mira, concern immediately replacing the fierce intensity that had dominated his expression moments before. "I am okay," Mira managed, though her voice trembled slightly with lingering adrenaline. "Eli, is he safe?" "I have already sent Nora to check on him," Cade assured her quickly, and as if summoned by his words, Nora appeared in the doorway of Eli's bedroom, the boy cradled protectively in her arms, still groggy from sleep but otherwise completely unharmed. Relief crashed through Mira with such force that her knees momentarily weakened, though she quickly steadied herself, moving to gather Eli from Nora's arms, holding her son tightly against her chest as he blinked sleepily, confused by the commotion surrounding him. "Mommy, what is happening?" Eli asked, his voice small and uncertain despite his obvious grogginess. "Everything is okay now, sweetheart," Mira soothed, though her own voice still carried traces of the fear that had gripped her only moments before. "You are safe." Cade, meanwhile, dealt swiftly with the subdued intruder, his expression hardening into cold determination as he addressed the man still restrained on the floor. "Who sent you?" he demanded, his voice carrying dangerous authority. The intruder remained defiantly silent, though Mira noticed a flicker of genuine fear crossing his features as he met Cade's intense golden gaze. After a tense moment, Cade straightened, his posture relaxing slightly, though the intensity in his eyes remained unchanged. "We will get answers later," Cade said, gesturing for two additional figures who had appeared silently in the doorway, pack members Mira had not previously met, who quickly moved to secure the still resistant intruder and remove him from the apartment. Once the immediate danger had passed, Cade turned his full attention back to Mira and Eli, his expression softening with visible relief and lingering concern. "I should have anticipated this sooner," he said, frustration evident beneath his careful composure. "I underestimated how quickly they might move once they became aware of the situation." "You saved us," Mira said, still holding Eli close, gratitude and lingering fear mixing together in her chest. "Thank you, Cade. I do not know what would have happened if you had not arrived when you did. I will not allow anything to happen to either of you," Cade said firmly, moving closer, his gaze shifting briefly to Eli before returning to Mira's face. "But we cannot risk staying here any longer. It is no longer safe for you to remain in this apartment." Mira nodded, understanding immediately the gravity of the situation, despite her exhaustion and lingering shock. "What do you suggest?" she asked. "I want you both to come stay at my estate," Cade said, his tone leaving little room for argument, though his eyes carried genuine concern rather than simple command. "It is heavily protected, far more secure than anywhere else I can offer you on such short notice. You will both be safe there while we address this threat properly." Mira glanced around their small familiar apartment, now marked by shattered glass and splintered wood, the sanctuary she had carefully built for herself and Eli over the years, suddenly feeling fragile and exposed. Despite her natural hesitation at such a significant change, she recognized she had little choice but to trust Cade's judgment, especially now that she had witnessed firsthand the very real danger threatening her son. "Okay," she said finally, exhaustion and relief mixing together in her voice. "We will come with you." Cade nodded, visible relief washing over his features at her agreement. "Gather what you need for tonight," he said gently. "We can arrange for the rest of your belongings to be moved safely once we have secured the area completely." As Mira moved through the apartment gathering essential items, Eli clinging tightly to her side despite his obvious exhaustion, She found herself reflecting on how dramatically her understanding of safety and normalcy had shifted in the span of just a few short weeks. The world she had once believed simple and predictable had revealed itself to be far more complex and dangerous than she ever imagined. Yet amid this frightening revelation, she had also discovered unexpected strength within herself, and steadfast protection in the unlikely figure of a mysterious doctor, who had turned out to be far more than he initially appeared. As they finally departed the damaged apartment, Cade carrying a sleepy Eli against his shoulder, while Mira followed closely behind with a small bag of essentials, she glanced back one final time at the modest home where she had raised her son, largely in peaceful obscurity. Whatever came next, whatever dangers and revelations still awaited them within the hidden world Cade represented, Mira understood clearly now that there was no returning to the simple, unaware existence they had known before that fateful stormy night weeks ago. The car ride to Cade's estate passed mostly in silence, Eli having fallen back asleep against Cade's shoulder, almost immediately after settling into the vehicle, while Mira stared out the window, watching the familiar city streets gradually give way to quieter, more secluded roads leading toward the outskirts of town. Despite the fear and uncertainty still churning within her, she found unexpected comfort in Cade's steady presence beside her. In the careful, protective way he continued glancing toward Eli, even as he focused on navigating the darkened roads ahead. Whatever challenges awaited them at this unfamiliar estate, whatever dangers continued lurking within the shadows of Cade's hidden world, Mira found herself holding on to a fragile but persistent hope that together they would find a way to navigate through the storm, now fully surrounding their lives, emerging eventually into whatever new future awaited them on the other side. The estate emerged from the darkness like something out of a dream Mira never expected to find herself living within. Tall iron gates opened silently as their car approached, revealing a sprawling property surrounded by dense forest, the main house itself an impressive structure built from dark stone that somehow managed to feel both imposing and welcoming beneath the soft glow of exterior lighting scattered throughout the grounds. Eli stirred as the car came to a stop, blinking sleepily at the impressive building before them. "Is this a castle?" he mumbled, his voice thick with drowsiness. And despite the tension still lingering in her chest, Mira could not help smiling softly at his innocent wonder. "Something like that," Cade replied gently, carrying the boy carefully as they made their way toward the entrance, where several figures waited, watching the new arrivals with a mixture of curiosity and cautious respect. Inside, the estate revealed itself to be far more than simply an impressive residence. Mira quickly realized this was the true heart of Cade's world, a place where dozens of pack members lived and worked together, maintaining a complex, organized community that operated according to structures and traditions Mira was only beginning to understand. Everywhere she looked, she noticed subtle signs of watchfulness, of careful protection woven into every aspect of daily life within these walls. Cade led them to a comfortable suite of rooms on the estate's upper floor, explaining quietly that this would serve as their temporary home, while security concerns were properly addressed. Eli, exhausted from the night's events, fell asleep almost immediately, once settled into the unfamiliar but comfortable bed, leaving Mira alone, with Cade, in the adjoining sitting room. "I know this is overwhelming," Cade said quietly, watching Mira as she moved to stand near the tall window overlooking the moonlit grounds below. "I promise, you will both be completely safe here." Mira turned to face him, exhaustion evident in her posture, despite the adrenaline still occasionally spiking through her system as she processed everything that had happened. "This is a lot to take in," she admitted. "Yesterday I was worried about paying rent and making sure Eli finished his homework. Tonight I am living in an actual estate, because my son might be some kind of hidden heir to a world I did not even know existed until a few weeks ago." Cade's expression softened with understanding and quiet compassion. "You have handled everything with remarkable strength," he said. "Most people would have struggled far more significantly, adjusting to revelations of this magnitude." "I do not feel very strong right now," Mira admitted honestly, wrapping her arms around herself, as the weight of the evening's events finally began settling fully into her exhausted mind and body. Cade moved closer, though he maintained a respectful distance, his gray eyes studying her with careful attention. "You are allowed to feel overwhelmed," he said gently. "What matters is that despite everything, you continue choosing to protect Eli. and trust in what needs to be done to keep him safe. That takes genuine courage, regardless of how you feel in this particular moment. Mira looked up at him, finding unexpected comfort in his steady presence, in the quiet strength he offered without demanding anything in return. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything you have done for us, for the protection, for trusting us with the truth about your world, even though it clearly comes with significant risk to you and your pack." "Eli reminded me what genuine goodness looks like," Cade said quietly, his gaze holding hers with an intensity that made Mira's heart skip slightly. "And you, Mira, you have reminded me why protecting others, truly caring for them beyond simple duty, remains worth every risk and sacrifice involved." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken emotion neither seemed quite ready to fully name or acknowledge. Finally, Cade stepped back slightly, clearing his throat gently. "You should rest," he said. "Tomorrow we will discuss next steps more thoroughly, once everyone has had proper time to recover from tonight." Mira nodded, though part of her reluctantly wished he had not stepped back so quickly. "Good night, Cade," she said softly. "Good night, Mira," he replied, lingering for just a moment longer, before finally turning to leave the room, closing the door quietly behind him. Alone in the unfamiliar but comfortable room, Mira moved to check on Eli one final time, watching her son sleep peacefully, blissfully unaware of the danger he had narrowly escaped only hours earlier. She settled into the chair beside his bed, exhaustion finally overtaking her as she allowed herself to drift into much-needed sleep, comforted by the knowledge that for tonight at least, they were safe within these protected walls. The following morning brought with it a new routine that Mira slowly began adjusting to over subsequent days. She learned the layout of the impressive estate, met various pack members who greeted her with cautious politeness, uncertain exactly how to treat this human woman and her son who had suddenly become significant figures within their carefully protected world. Some, like Nora, showed genuine warmth and welcome, while others maintained careful distance, their expressions guarded whenever Mira or Eli passed nearby. Eli, however, adapted with the effortless resilience only children seem to possess, quickly making friends among the younger pack members his age, his natural curiosity and enthusiasm helping him settle into this strange new environment far more easily than Mira herself managed. Within days, he was running through the estate's expansive grounds with newfound friends, their laughter echoing pleasantly through hallways that had likely witnessed far more serious and somber moments throughout their long history. Mira spent much of her time observing, learning, and slowly beginning to understand the intricate social structures governing pack life. She noticed the deep respect commanded by Cade's presence whenever he moved through the estate, the way pack members straightened instinctively, offering deference that spoke clearly of his position as alpha, leader and protector of this entire community. Yet she also witnessed moments of unexpected tenderness, watching Cade patiently mediate a dispute between two younger pack members, offering guidance to an elderly member struggling with some personal difficulty, spending quiet moments each evening checking on Eli's well-being, despite the significant responsibilities clearly weighing upon him throughout each day. Their own relationship continued deepening subtly during this time, conversations extending naturally into shared meals, quiet walks through the estate's peaceful gardens, moments of genuine connection that felt increasingly significant, despite neither of them fully acknowledging the growing depth of feeling developing between them. Mira found herself looking forward to these moments more than she wanted to admit, appreciating not just Cade's protection, but his genuine company, his thoughtful perspective, the quiet strength he offered without ever demanding anything in return. Yet beneath this gradually settling new normal, an undercurrent of tension remained ever present. Pack members maintained heightened vigilance throughout the estate, careful patrols continuing around the property's perimeter, serious discussions occurring frequently in Cade's private study regarding the ongoing threat still posed by whoever had orchestrated the attack on their previous apartment. One evening, nearly a week after their arrival, Mira found Cade standing alone on a balcony, overlooking the moonlit grounds, his expression troubled despite his usual careful composure. She approached quietly, joining him at the railing. "Difficult day?" she asked gently, noticing the visible weariness etched into his features. Cade sighed, running a hand through his dark hair, a rare display of visible frustration breaking through his typically controlled demeanor. "We have identified the group responsible for the attack," he said finally, It is worse than I initially suspected. There appears to be someone within my own inner circle, providing information to our rivals. Mira's breath caught at this revelation, understanding immediately the gravity of betrayal implied within Cade's careful words. A traitor? She asked quietly. It appears so, Cade confirmed, his voice tight, with barely restrained anger and hurt. I do not yet know who, but the details of the attack, the timing, the specific knowledge displayed regarding Eli's connection to me, none of that information should have been accessible to outsiders, without someone close to me providing it deliberately. Mira reached out instinctively, placing a comforting hand on his arm, understanding the deep betrayal such a discovery represented within a community built upon trust and loyalty. I am sorry, she said softly. That must be incredibly difficult to process, especially while also dealing with everything else currently happening. Cade's gaze shifted to meet hers, something vulnerable flickering behind his usual composed exterior. Having you and Eli here, he admitted quietly. Having your support during all of this, it helps more than you probably realize. Mira held his gaze, feeling the weight and warmth of unspoken emotion passing silently between them. We are in this together now, she said firmly. Whatever comes next, however this all unfolds, you do not have to face it entirely alone. Cade's hand moved to cover hers, where it still rested against his arm. The gesture simple, but carrying profound significance in that quiet, moonlit moment. Thank you, he said softly, his voice carrying genuine gratitude and something deeper still, an emotion neither of them was quite ready to fully name, though its presence had become undeniable, growing steadily stronger with each passing day they spent together, within the protected walls of his ancestral home. 3 days after Cade's revelation about the possible traitor within his inner circle, the estate buzzed with a tension that even Eli seemed to sense, his usual boundless energy dampened slightly by the watchful seriousness surrounding him. Mira noticed increased security measures throughout the property, additional guards stationed at various entry points, pack members moving with heightened alertness that spoke clearly of the danger everyone understood remained close at hand. Cade had grown increasingly withdrawn during this period, spending long hours in private meetings with trusted advisors, attempting to identify the source of the betrayal that had nearly cost Eli his safety. Mira understood the necessity of his focus, yet she also noticed the toll it took on him, the exhaustion evident in his posture, the careful control he maintained, even as frustration and worry clearly weighed heavily upon him. It was during a quiet afternoon, while Eli played in the estate's enclosed garden under Nora's watchful supervision, that Mira first noticed something unusual about one of the estate's senior advisors, a man named Derek who had held a position of trust within Cade's inner circle for many years. She had encountered him several times since arriving, always polite, but carrying an undercurrent of something Mira could not quite identify, something that made her instinctively cautious despite his outwardly respectful demeanor. That afternoon, Mira happened to walk past Cade's private study, the door slightly ajar, and caught a glimpse of Derek standing near Cade's desk, apparently alone in the room, his attention focused intently on a small device he held carefully concealed in his palm. Something about his posture, the careful way he glanced toward the door before quickly pocketing the device, sent an immediate wave of suspicion through Mira's instincts. She continued walking, careful not to reveal she had noticed anything unusual, though her mind raced with the implications of what she had just witnessed. That evening, she found a private moment to share her observation with Cade, watching his expression shift from surprise to grim understanding as she described what she had seen. Derek has served this pack faithfully for over a decade, Cade said slowly, though doubt had clearly crept into his voice, despite his initial reluctance to suspect someone he had trusted for so long. I find it difficult to believe he would betray us now. I understand your hesitation, Mira said carefully, but something about what I saw felt deliberately secretive. Perhaps it is worth investigating further, just to rule out any concerns. Cade nodded slowly, clearly troubled by the possibility, yet recognizing the wisdom in Mira's suggestion. I will look into it discreetly, he said. Thank you for telling me, Mira. Your instincts have proven remarkably sharp throughout all of this. Over the following 2 days, Cade quietly investigated Derek's activities, discovering troubling evidence that gradually confirmed Mira's initial suspicions. Communications intercepted through careful monitoring revealed Derek had indeed been providing sensitive information to the rival family, motivated by grievances stemming from a leadership dispute years earlier that Cade had not fully appreciated the lingering resentment from. The full extent of the betrayal became devastatingly clear on a tense evening when Cade gathered his most trusted advisors to confront Derek directly. Mira, despite her initial hesitation about becoming further involved in pack politics, chose to remain present, standing quietly beside Cade as the confrontation unfolded within the grand hall of the estate. Derek's composure crumbled quickly under the weight of undeniable evidence presented before him, his carefully maintained facade of loyalty dissolving into a mixture of defiance and desperate justification. "You do not understand what it was like," he said bitterly, addressing Cade directly. "Watching leadership pass to you when there were others equally qualified, equally deserving. I did what I believed necessary to correct an imbalance that should never have existed. You chose to endanger an innocent child," Cade responded, his voice carrying deadly quiet fury that seemed far more threatening than any raised voice could have conveyed. "Whatever grievances you held against my leadership, nothing justifies the danger you knowingly brought against Eli, against Mira, against innocent lives that had nothing to do with your personal ambitions." The confrontation grew increasingly tense, Derek's desperation becoming apparent as he realized the full scope of consequences awaiting his betrayal. In a sudden, desperate move, he lunged toward a nearby window, apparently intending to escape before proper judgment could be enacted against him. However, before he could reach the window, a commotion erupted from outside the hall, shouts and sounds of struggle echoing through the estate's normally peaceful grounds. Cade's expression shifted instantly to alarm. "Eli," he said urgently, already moving swiftly toward the source of the disturbance, Mira close behind him, her heart pounding with sudden terror at the possibility that danger had somehow reached her son despite the estate's extensive security measures. They arrived at the garden to find chaos unfolding rapidly. Several unfamiliar figures had breached the estate's perimeter, apparently taking advantage of the distraction created by Derek's confrontation to launch a coordinated attack aimed directly at capturing Eli. Nora fought fiercely to protect the boy, her movements swift and skilled despite being significantly outnumbered by the attackers, who had clearly anticipated this exact opportunity. Mira's fear transformed instantly into fierce, protective determination as she caught sight of her son, terrified, but resolutely standing his ground behind Nora's protective stance, refusing to simply cower despite the danger surrounding him. Without conscious thought, Mira found herself moving forward, an intense, primal strength surging through her body, unlike anything she had ever experienced before. She intercepted one of the attackers who had broken away from the main confrontation, moving toward Eli with clear intent to seize him amid the chaos. Mira's movements, though inexperienced, carried surprising speed and determination, driven entirely by desperate maternal instinct. She managed to knock the attacker off balance long enough for additional pack members, alerted by the commotion, to arrive and quickly subdue him. Meanwhile, Cade fought with fierce, controlled precision against the remaining attackers, his enhanced strength and skill quickly turning the tide of the confrontation, despite the attackers' initial advantage of surprise. Within minutes, the assault had been fully repelled, the remaining attackers either subdued or fleeing back into the surrounding forest, pursued by several pack members determined to prevent their escape. As the immediate danger passed, Mira rushed to Eli, gathering him tightly into her arms, checking desperately for any signs of injury, despite his reassurances that he remained unharmed. Nora, breathing heavily from the intense confrontation but otherwise unhurt, offered Mira a grateful nod, acknowledging the crucial role Mira had played in protecting Eli during those chaotic, dangerous moments. Cade approached quickly, his expression a complex mixture of relief and lingering fury, as he confirmed both Mira and Eli remained safe. "That was too close," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "I should never have allowed Derek's confrontation to become a distraction that created such an opportunity for attack." "This is not your fault," Mira said firmly, still holding Eli close, despite the immediate danger having passed. "You could not have anticipated this specific timing. What matters now is that we are safe, and that we have clearly identified and stopped the source of betrayal within your circle." Cade nodded slowly, though guilt remained evident in his expression as he processed the events that had just unfolded. As additional pack members returned, reporting the successful capture of Derek, who had attempted to flee during the chaos but had been apprehended before escaping the estate grounds, A heavy sense of resolution settled over the tense gathering. In the aftermath, as the estate slowly returned to a semblance of calm following the intense confrontation, Cade found Mira sitting quietly with Eli in their private sitting room, the boy finally drifting off to exhausted sleep after the frightening ordeal. Cade lingered in the doorway for a moment, watching the tender scene before finally stepping inside. "You were incredible today," he said softly, careful not to disturb Eli's sleep. "The way you protected him, the courage you showed facing that attacker directly. I have rarely witnessed such fierce determination, even among experienced pack members." Mira looked up at him, exhaustion evident in her features despite the lingering adrenaline still coursing faintly through her system. "I did what any mother would do," she said simply. "Protecting him is instinct, not choice." Cade moved closer, settling into the chair beside her, his gaze lingering on Eli's peaceful, sleeping form, before shifting back to meet Mira's tired eyes. "Not every mother would have the strength or courage to face that kind of danger so directly," he said quietly. "What you did today, Mira, it reminded me of exactly why I have come to admire and care for you so deeply." Mira's breath caught slightly at his words, the vulnerable sincerity behind them creating a warmth that spread gently through her chest, despite the exhaustion and lingering fear from the day's events. "I care about you too, Cade," she admitted softly, the words feeling both natural and significant, as she finally allowed herself to voice feelings that had been steadily growing since that very first stormy night weeks ago. Cade reached out gently, his hand finding hers, fingers intertwining with careful tenderness. "Whatever challenges remain ahead," he said quietly, "I want you to know that my feelings for you extend far beyond simple gratitude or duty. You and Eli have become genuinely important to me, in ways I never expected to experience again after everything I endured years ago." Mira squeezed his hand gently, finding comfort and quiet strength in the warmth of his touch, in the sincerity radiating from his gray eyes, as he watched her with an intensity that spoke clearly of emotions, long carefully guarded, but no longer able to remain fully hidden. "Whatever comes next," she said softly, "I am grateful we are facing it together." As the evening settled peacefully around them, the immediate danger finally addressed with Derek's betrayal exposed and the attack successfully repelled, Mira allowed herself a rare moment of genuine hope, sensing that despite the challenges and dangers still likely awaiting them, she and Eli had found not just protection, but a place and a person where they truly belonged. Weeks passed, following the confrontation with Derek and the failed attack on the estate, and slowly, a fragile but genuine peace began settling over Cade's territory. With the traitor exposed and properly dealt with according to pack law, and with the rival family's immediate plans effectively disrupted by the failure of their coordinated assault, the constant tension that had gripped the estate gradually eased into something resembling calm normalcy. Eli thrived within this new environment, his initial fear from the attack fading quickly, with the resilience only children seemed to possess so naturally. He had grown close with several other pack children his age, spending his days engaged in exploration and play throughout the estate's expansive grounds, his laughter once again filling the hallways with the same carefree joy that had first drawn Cade's protective instincts toward him weeks earlier. Mira, too, found herself settling more comfortably into this unexpected new chapter of her life. She had grown close with several pack members, including Nora, who had become something of a genuine friend during their shared experiences protecting Eli. She had also begun learning more about her own developing connection to the hidden world she now called home, discovering with quiet wonder that her own dormant heritage carried more potential than she had initially realized, strength and instinct steadily growing stronger the more she embraced this new understanding of herself. Her relationship with Cade had continued deepening as well, evolving naturally from careful friendship into something deeper and more significant that neither of them any longer felt the need to hide or deny. Their quiet evening conversations had become a cherished routine, moments of genuine connection shared over dinner or during peaceful walks through the estate's gardens after Eli had settled into sleep each night. One evening, several weeks after the estate had fully returned to peaceful routine, Cade requested that Mira join him for a private dinner on the balcony overlooking the moonlit grounds, the same location where he had first confided in her about the suspected betrayal weeks earlier. She arrived to find the space transformed with soft candlelight and carefully arranged flowers, a gesture that immediately told her this evening carried special significance beyond their usual quiet conversations. "This is beautiful," Mira said, taking in the peaceful, romantic setting with genuine appreciation as she settled into the seat Cade had prepared for her. "I wanted tonight to be meaningful," Cade said, his voice carrying a nervous energy that seemed unusual for a man who typically maintained such careful, confident composure. "There is something important I would like to discuss with you." Mira's heart quickened slightly at his tone, curiosity and anticipation mixing together as she studied his expression carefully. "Of course," she said gently. "You can tell me anything, Cade. You know that by now." Cade took a steadying breath before continuing, his gray eyes meeting hers with unwavering sincerity. "From the moment you first appeared at my clinic that stormy night, desperate to save Eli, something within me shifted in ways I did not fully understand or expect," he began. "I had spent years isolating myself, believing that duty and protection needed to come before personal connection, especially after everything my pack endured during the conflict that first drove me into hiding." Mira listened carefully, sensing the significance of what Cade was working toward expressing, her own heart swelling with anticipation and warmth as she watched him navigate through emotions he clearly did not often allow himself to fully voice. "But you, and Eli," Cade continued, his voice growing steadier as he spoke, "you reminded me what it truly means to care deeply for someone, to find purpose not just in duty and protection, but in genuine connection and love. Watching you fight so fiercely to protect your son, witnessing your courage and resilience through everything these past months, I have come to realize that my feelings for you extend far beyond simple admiration or gratitude." He reached across the table, gently taking her hand in his touch warm and steady, despite the visible vulnerability in his expression. "I love you, Mira," he said softly, the words carrying weight and sincerity that left no room for doubt. "And I love Eli as though he were truly my own son. I want you both to remain here, not simply for protection or safety, but because this is where you belong, where we belong together, if you are willing to accept that future alongside me." Tears gathered in Mira's eyes, happiness and overwhelming emotion mixing together as she processed the depth and sincerity of Cade's declaration. "I love you too, Cade," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "These past months have changed everything for me, for both of us. I never expected to find this kind of connection again, especially not in such extraordinary circumstances, but I am endlessly grateful that I did." Cade's expression softened into genuine joy, relief and happiness clearly evident as he processed her response. "Then will you consider making this permanent?" he asked gently, "staying here, not just temporarily, but building a life together, as a family?" Mira smiled through her happy tears, squeezing his hand gently in response. "Yes," she said softly. "Eli and I would love nothing more than to build our lives here, with you." Their quiet celebration was interrupted by the soft sound of small footsteps approaching, and both turned to find Eli standing curiously in the balcony doorway, having woken from sleep and wandered in search of his mother. "Are you both getting married?" he asked, with the blunt, innocent curiosity only children seem to possess, his question immediately breaking the emotional tension with unexpected laughter from both adults. Cade knelt down to Eli's level, his expression warm and genuine, as he addressed the boy directly. "Would that be all right with you?" he asked seriously, clearly valuing Eli's opinion and feelings regarding this significant change to their family dynamic. Eli considered this question with surprising seriousness for a moment, before breaking into an enthusiastic grin. "Yes," he said excitedly. "Then you could be my dad for real, and I could stay here with all my friends forever." Cade's eyes grew suspiciously bright at Eli's words, clearly moved by the boy's genuine acceptance and enthusiasm. "Then it is settled," he said, his voice thick with quiet emotion. "We will build this life together, all three of us, as a true family." In the months that followed, Cade formally announced Mira and Eli's permanent place within his pack, publicly declaring his intention to build a life alongside them, a declaration met with genuine warmth and acceptance from the majority of pack members who had witnessed firsthand Mira's courage and Eli's resilience throughout the recent challenges they had all faced together. Their eventual wedding, held within the peaceful gardens of the estate under a canopy of soft evening light, was a joyful celebration attended by the entire pack. a testament to how thoroughly Mira and Eli had become woven into the fabric of this once hidden world. Eli, beaming with pride, stood proudly beside Cade throughout the ceremony, his excitement at gaining a father he clearly already loved, deeply evident to everyone in attendance. As Mira stood beside Cade that evening, surrounded by the community that had become her true family, she found herself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. From that desperate, rain-soaked night when she had pounded on a stranger's door, begging for her son's life to be saved, to this joyful celebration surrounded by love, acceptance, and genuine belonging, her life had transformed in ways she never could have imagined possible. She glanced toward Cade, meeting his warm, steady gaze, and felt overwhelming gratitude for the mysterious doctor, who had turned out to be so much more than she ever expected. A man whose quiet strength and genuine compassion had not only saved her son's life that stormy night, but had ultimately saved her own heart as well, offering both her and Eli a place to truly belong, protected and deeply loved, for the rest of their lives together. That night, as the celebration continued joyfully around them, Cade leaned close, whispering softly against her ear. "Thank you for trusting me that stormy night," he said, his voice filled with quiet warmth and gratitude, "for believing that a stranger might be able to help, when you had every reason to expect otherwise." Mira smiled, leaning into him with complete trust and contentment. "Thank you for being exactly the person Eli and I needed," she replied softly, "not just as a doctor, but as the man who would come to mean everything to us both." As the stars emerged fully overhead, casting gentle light across the joyful gathering below, Mira understood with complete certainty that whatever challenges the future might still hold, she, Eli, and Cade would face them together, bound not simply by circumstance or gratitude, but by genuine love, unwavering loyalty, and the profound, unshakable family they had built together against all odds, beginning with one desperate plea on a rain-soaked night that had changed everything.